My name is Jessie May, and I'm a survivor of child abuse and the foster care system. My parents separated when I was very young. When my mother had somebody come into the home to start helping, she trusted her brother to be the one to care for us kids. Unfortunately, that brother had problems. He had undiagnosed medical conditions. He was just adamant. You had to do certain thing. We had to lay in the position on the bed, arms by our sides, legs straight, looking up, not making any noises. And that was our punishment. Mike would start to spank us. And I remember hearing my little brother crying. I stood outside the door and I could hear him being hit over and over and over again. I remember going to our father's house that night. My little brother was fidgeting in his seat. I remember my dad, who was very proper and you sit at the table and you behave properly and have manners. And then I broke in and I said, Dad, there's a reason. I looked at my brother in the face and I said, John, go and show him. I remember him getting on the phone right away. So he called the ministry December 20th, 1993. When we first went into care, I remember being so confused. We're with strangers. We were not allowed to see either one of our parents. We had to change schools. We had to change so many different things in a very short period of time. So the first foster family, I was just feeling like I was abandoned and I took it out on them. I was moved with my little brother. Now the second home, there were more problems. The daughter actually had a bladder problem and I had to share the room with her. Her mother would come in and verbally abuse her every single morning. She was always yelling. There was always something. We were always doing something wrong. That was the very first time I ran away. They moved us again. We went into the third home. Now this third home is where the most damage was done and I stopped talking. This foster parent, single mom with 2 boys. I idolized her and I was grasping. I was hoping for love. I opened up my heart to this family. In a very short period of time, her eldest son started to molest me. He had such a very commanding presence. He was a bigger boy. It was when we were all supposed to be sleeping at night. I remember that even though I was a girl and they were boys, we were still allowed to sleep together. So I remember waking up and him having his hands on me. And I remember freezing, not knowing what to do. I was feeling like I was a different person. At the beginning, I remember feeling like I was not worth it. I was a little girl and I was just I knew that it wasn't right. And I remember just feeling like this is going to be my life. I'd always try to pretend like I was sleeping because I didn't know how to confront him. As things progressed and time went on, he would do it when I was awake. And this is when I verbally would tell him, no, don't touch me. I don't want to be touched. Leave me alone. I would no longer sleep with everybody else. I would sleep in my own room. I wouldn't participate in any of the kid stuff. He would still find me. One time I woke up and I was in my room and he was right beside my bed. That was upstairs across the hall from my foster parents' room. I had told my foster mother what had happened. And she told me in that living room that it is natural and kids are curious and just say no. He was doing this in front of other people. I remember Alexa, my foster mother's niece, she had come to visit that day and they went running upstairs and complained to my foster parents. They never came downstairs. And again, there was never any reports made to MCFD. I just stopped talking entirely. We were having a sleepover. I woke up in pain. I went to the bathroom and there was blood on the paper and I hadn't had my period yet. I was between 11 and 12 years old. And I remember thinking that I had been raped. That sat with me for many years. I tried to talk to everybody that I felt were the people to talk to. My foster parent, who I actually did look at like a second mother. I had that Stockholm syndrome kind of thing going on where I was loving the person that was hurting me. I felt so confused and manipulated and used that I tried so hard to just be okay with everything and just put on a face and pretend like everything was fine. Inside, I was dying. What really started the end to me being in that foster home was the allegation that was made. There was another little boy who lived in the home, who was my foster father's son. He was younger than my brother. I remember his mother, who was a social worker, going to the cops and saying, hey, something's happening to my kid. I remember getting a phone call from my social worker, Zoe Eyre, and I remember her asking me on the phone if anything had happened to me. There was somebody listening on the other line, which was Heidi. MCFD had given her permission to review and be on the phone for any call that ever went into the house. So here Zoe is on the other phone saying, hey, did Heidi's son ever hurt you? Did he ever touch you? Did any of this stuff ever happen? I remember denying it, saying, nope, nothing, everything's fine. And then I heard the click on the phone. She hung up. The policy and procedure is if there is any allegation, a child is supposed to be removed from the home until the allegations are figured to be of merit or not, right? That never happened. We were driven by the foster mother to our CMP station to make our statement. During that ride to the police station, we were guilt tripped. We had to be very careful about what we said because everybody is getting separated and, the family is getting broken up and, that we can figure out a way to make it all work. Just please don't break up my family. So I remember going into the police station and sitting down to make my statement and just saying, no, nothing ever happened. Now, I remember saying, though, in that statement that the kid wouldn't lie. I couldn't say anything for myself, but for Chase, I said he would have no reason to lie. Within this short period of time is when my social worker asked me to be a part of question panel. It was for 52 lawyers and judges from all across the province who wanted to come and discuss being a foster child and the different dynamics and how it affected us. They basically more or less wanted to understand if we were mature enough at our ages to make a proper rational decision on where we wanted to live if we were in a custodial battle against the MCFD. We went through this panel, and at the end of everything, they changed the law. Okay, they changed it from 16 years old to 13, the new year. There's some serious conflict in the house. My foster mother, her son has assaulted so many other kids. My foster father's son is the one who made the allegation. And me and my brother, who was also assaulted, were in the middle. I remember going upstairs and having a conversation with my foster father. And I remember him sitting in there. He was just distraught. He's just like, I just don't know what to do. He was so confused. And I remember still not being able to tell him. But I remember telling him that your son wouldn't lie. And that's all I could tell to him. I couldn't go into anything more. I remember crying. I remember feeling like I was letting Chase down. I felt like I was letting my brother down and myself because I couldn't talk about it. I was in that frozen state all over again. I remember packing my bag and jumping out my window. That's exactly how I ran away. I never went back to that home. I instinctually wanted to go back home to my mother. She has no idea about what had actually happened in the home, okay? So she was just like, okay, I want to protect my daughter and we're got to go through this the right way. Finally, Zoe got a hold of my mother again. And Zoe said, well, your daughter helped change the law. She's going to be 13 in 6 weeks. There's no point in coming to get her because she can make the decision to move in with you in 6 weeks' time. So we're just going to let her stay with you. The ministry never gave my mom my child support until she had full custody. So my mother survived with me being home for the first 4 months on whatever income she had. April 21st was a very monumental day for me. The night before, I had opened up to my sister about what happened to me in foster care. It was the day I found my voice again. And I was able to tell my sister what happened to me. It was the first time I felt I had the courage to share the story. My sister went to my mom right away. And my mother, I just remember the look on her face, and it was just, this isn't going down. And she got on the phone and called RCMP right away. And nothing. My mother kept calling them like, hey, we need to get my daughter to make a statement here. What's going on? My mother remembered a police officer actually hanging up on her and saying, you're putting these words in your daughter's mouth. We don't believe you. Zoe said the same thing to my mother. You're putting the words in her mouth. This never happened. We talked and she said nothing ever happened. My mother was denied, insulted, told that she was breaking the law by creating this story for me to be sharing. She called the local MLA. She called Sue Hamill and shared her story. And Sue Hamill believed me. She said, you know what? This isn't right. If there is ever an allegation, it has to be checked out. They have to take a statement. That's not the police officer who's taking your statement who decides whether it's true or not. It's a judge and a jury, okay? The RCMP finally did, in fact, take my statement. April 21st, that was the official start to my file. In September of 1999, he was charged and convicted of sexual assault to myself and of the other minor child who had made the original allegation. I am 14 years old. I had a subpoena to be a witness, and I had to go up on stand, and I had to go through every single detail in front of a room filled with strangers, in front of my foster parents, in front of the defendant, the boy that assaulted me multiple times by himself and with friends. I had to stand there and tell the truth about what happened to me in front of my social worker, who was supposed to be on my side and was sitting on theirs. I had the ultimate betrayal of trust, authority figures constantly telling me that I'm making things up and I'm creating falsehoods and I'm destroying people's lives when nobody asked about how mine was being destroyed. Nobody asked me what I was going through. After I stood on stand and answered all these questions and basically was put to question if I had enticed this kind of behavior and I had created all of these things as a small child. I was 9 when it started, remind you, okay? 9 years old, I'm a little girl. To have this defense lawyer come at me with these questions, it was one of the hardest things I've ever been through in my life. At the very end of everything, I sat in the front pew on my side and I looked up at this judge and he was making his judgment, his sentencing. And I remember him saying very clearly, there were so many things going on that he was really unsure. And then he said, but when Miss Schmicky got up on stand and she shared what happened to her, he said he knew without a doubt that it had happened. And he gave me that justice. And he said, enough is enough. But he was the first person of some sort of authority that believed me. He was sentenced to a 1.5 years of open house custody, that he was not allowed to be with minors under a certain age. He wasn't allowed to go to parks. And because he was a minor, as long as he did not reoffend, it would stay basically sealed. Where is he going to be living? With Heidi, his groomer, his helper, his person that helped facilitate all of this to happen. A child who was involved that I believe, through many years of my own personal counseling and such, I feel like maybe something happened to him. There's a reason why this little young person is doing these things to the same sex as well. Not just girls, but boys. And boys were like the predominant, that's what he did more of. We went through the courts, stamp on the thing, you were convicted. Nothing else was done after that. For my family, for myself, for my brother, I made my statement in April. He stayed in that home until July of that year, months after the allegation. There's no help for my family. There was no help for me. There was like, hey, do you need counseling? Do you need somebody who's not involved to get involved? Like, Please, what do you need? How can we help you? There was none of that. Victims Compensation Act, you have to have a conviction to be entitled to these benefits, okay? I charge and convict, and there was no victim compensation for me. There was no help. We're failed. We got a systematic fail here, okay? Many other things happened to me before I started to get better. I was on the streets. I ran away from my mom because she tried so much to love me that it was overbearing. I felt like, how could she love me? I didn't understand that love of a mother is unconditional. I don't want this attention. Like, I feel unworthy of it. I felt angry and resentful, and I took it out on everybody. And again, these are tools that should have been taught, that should have been shared for the interpersonal relationships that I had, how to have healthy boundaries, how to have proper foundations. None of this was ever taught. I never had a sex education talk. I never had somebody telling me what's the appropriate behaviors to have between the sexes. I just felt like a target. I felt like I was just one of those people that was just going to keep having things happen to them. 2002, I am in a horrific car accident. I died and was brought back with CPR. I woke up from a coma. I was in life support for 4 days. I have a brain injury. My body's broken, and I don't know who the hell I am. Up until that point, I had always questioned God, because I thought, how could he love me if I go through all this? And I woke up from this accident and I knew that God loved me. I knew that God was with me. There is no words to describe what I went through in that hospital bed, okay? There isn't. It's just the feeling, that feeling of unconditional love, the warmth that I felt, and the knowledge that I had to get up and I had to get better, that I had to find my strength, and that there was more to my story. I just remember one step in front of the next. Just keep going. Just keep trying. I had the unconditional love from my family, who kept trying regardless of me fighting them and pushing them away. My family kept coming. Slowly, as time went on, I just started to build as a person. On the 7th year, I was asked to be a part of Miss Universe Canada. And this is after I had, gone through, I traveled the world. I'd been involved in lots of different things. And I was just like flying by the seat of my pants. I had no coaching. I had no manager. I had no help. I was just like, sure, you want to do it? Let's go. Let's go get it done. So 2009, I was accepted for the pageantry. My mom was battling cancer at the time, and there was just too much emotional upheaval that I just said, you know what? I need to take a break on this. I did soul searching. I saw that Eat, Pray, Love movie with Julia Roberts, and I literally did that. I went to Thailand, I went to Bali, I went to St. Lucia and Cuba, and like all these different countries, and I was soul searching, trying to identify who I am, what I want, what's my path. 2011, I remember contacting our Canadian director, and I asked him, I said, Dennis, I said, it's been 2 years since we last talked, but I said, I'm ready now. And I remember him saying, where do we meet? There were so many beautiful things that happened within that course of running for the pageant that taught me what I was supposed to be doing. It was to reach out. This is exactly why I've gone through everything in my life that I have, and I'm able to share it like a story, because the past is over and the future is what we make it, right? We were taken to a high school, and then we're going to choose a special person tomorrow, and we'll let you know. So think about this, what you want to talk to them about. I remember going into the audience, like we go in, we're all standing there, all of us delegates, and Andrew's like, oh, and then everybody's done, and thank you so much for that. But we have one special guest speaker, and she's coming from New Westminster. Please welcome Jessie May Broadhurst. My heart stopped. Holding the mic and talking to these kids, I just went for it. Talking to them about being their age and being in a school just like theirs, but being a foster kid and having nobody really pay attention to me or feel like I was part of the it crowd. I felt like I was bullied a lot. I felt like I was, the black sheep. I remember all these kids' eyes just start to come and look at me. And I remember telling them at the end of everything, like, talk to your parents, talk to your teachers, talk to anybody that will listen if there's a problem. In the end, you only have yourself to count on. Nobody can help you get through life but yourself. That was God allowing me to just share what was in my heart. That's always been one of my proudest moments. So when I ran for Miss Universe Canada, I ran from my home province of New Westminster, British Columbia, and I walked that stage with pride. I had both of my parents in the audience, and I finished that knowing that I completed something for the first time in my life. I feel that sharing my story is important because awareness is key. Me sharing about what happened to me is not for anything other than to help somebody else find their way. There are too many children from yesteryears who are now adults who are continuing the cycle, who are creating hardships for other people because they haven't healed themselves. I became a mom of a little girl, and it changed everything for me. The things that happened to me would never happen to my kid. My advice for anybody that has gone through the things that I have lightly talked about is to find your peace. Find what gives you the calmness in your heart, that gives you that feeling of justice. You don't have to go through court. You don't have to go through all those extenuating circumstances, but you have to find it within yourself. Because if you don't find it within yourself, your life is just going to be filled with trauma. You're going to consistently have things keep happening because you are vulnerable and you are in a victim standpoint still. So until you actually deal with it and handle it and own it, you're always going to stay in that state. And you can write it off with an and lifestyle and, always jet setting and always being a part of the party. But you know what? It's all going to slow down one day. And at that day, if you're prepared, you're going to be able to handle it or you're not. This is the best advice I can ever give you is stop running, find yourself, whatever way that is, because those are going to be your first steps of life. For you who's watching this story, I just want you to know in your heart that you're special, that anything that's ever happened to you, there's good too. And there's more to come. And you have to believe in yourself because that's the start to a beautiful future. It's you. It's got to be you.